Welcome to the second of two shows with the iconic Sam Donaldson. There are few people who've had a ringside seat to most of the major national and international events since the 1960s. As the chief White House correspondent, ABC News anchor, host of Primetime Live and his own show, The Sam Donaldson Show, Live in America, we are very glad to welcome back Mr. Sam Donaldson.
Holly, you are a glutton for punishment, and how would you foist this on your audience? Right. But I'm delighted to be here.
Well, it's great that you've been able to stop by the studio. I guess here at KSCE, you began your career here, is that right?
This building housed a station called KROD. It was owned by the El Paso Times. It was the first television station in El Paso in 1954, and I went to work for it. I was going to Texas Western College. Yeah. And I remember this studio we were in. And it was all new to me, but I thought there might be something in this business.
Now, when did you start with your love of broadcast news? I mean, that was when it was just beginning to be a significant factor,
well,
right?
Before then, I have a picture. I was in a Cub Scout uniform, and I was holding a crystal microphone, pretending to read the war news. Ah. We're talking World War II now, folks. My mother bought a radio for the first time after Pearl Harbor was bombed, and we could get the war news at 9 o'clock at night on the farm in New Mexico. And so there I was pretending to read the war news, although it wasn't a straight line. I tried to deviate many times.
Right, yeah. So it really was your calling from a very early age.
Well,
and you kind of...
You know, I reminisced a bit. I went to Dudley School, the grade school here. And after school, a lot of the boys I knew went over to Bobby Keller's house. Bobby's still around. I talked to him the other day. Great guy. His father was a doctor here, and they could play touch football. I was driven to shop lesson or piano lesson or elocution lesson, speech lesson, and then back home to the farm. Oh. And I resented that. I thank my mother now every day.
Yeah, elocution, that's a good one. Okay. So who do you've interviewed most of the major individuals in the last several decades. Who is the most interesting personality that you have interviewed?
Well, I think you're asking for people like the presidents that I've interviewed.
Sure.
I went down to the White House in Kennedy administration. I came to Washington 2 weeks after John Kennedy was inaugurated. I never had the courage to ask him a question. I was on the edge of the... But beginning with Lyndon Johnson up through George W. Bush, I've interviewed one-on-one every one of them. Not Barack Obama. I'm out of the picture now. The kids have pushed me out. I'm only 80. I mean, what's wrong with it? In any event, and everyone who seeks the presidency in the right way thinks they have a message for the country. They think they can do it, and they fight so hard to get it. I hope fairly, sometimes unfairly. People who just want to be president because, hey, that's a powerful office. I'm somebody. Thank goodness they rarely get it. You want to do something with the office. So in covering presidents, I look to see what's the motive there. I don't even remember your question, so I probably didn't answer it.
Well, no, in terms of who had the most interesting motive of the presidents that you had?
Well, they all did, in a sense. Lyndon Johnson was the best civil rights president we've had since Abraham Lincoln, barring none, including the present occupant of the office. But the war brought him low. Vietnam. Yeah. Listen to him. He taped his telephone calls. He didn't have a voice-activated tape in the Oval Office as Richard Nixon did, which brought Richard Nixon to ruin. I should amend that. Richard Nixon brought himself to ruin, but the evidence was on the tape. Listen to his phone. Go to the National Archives. Richard Russell, the great senator from Georgia, who was Lyndon Johnson's mentor. They're on the phone, 1960. Dick, I know we can't win in Vietnam, but I don't know what to do. They would ride me out of this town on a rail if I tried to withdraw. And he's probably right. In those days, we were all for fighting those dirty commies wherever we found them. He was brought low by that. Nixon, Democrats love the Environmental Protection Agency, Richard Nixon. Many of the things that he put in place.
China, relationship with China.
Opening to China. Right. Ronald Reagan ran for Shanghai Shek in California, not in 1980. Right. In other words, then of course there was that one thing. Yeah. He committed what would have been a felony had he been convicted of a jury of his peers, which he wasn't because he was pardoned. And I could say about each one, I won't take your time, but each one has been interesting. Reagan, most interesting to me, because to cover him was always exciting in the right way as well as sometimes the funny way.
Yeah, right. Do you think that we have a double standard? Because you talked about President Nixon and he basically leaving office, you know, being impeached. And then you have Bill Clinton, who also was impeached, but he didn't leave office. And then you have Newt Gingrich, who, you know, was brought down by his indiscretions, but yet you have others who, Anthony Weiner or whomever, they're not. So what is it that brings one down in terms of actions and scandals versus the other? Is it the media? Is it themselves? How does that work?
We're often accused, if we bring down in the sense that someone takes the fall and we've been covering in a negative way that person of having done it. But no, we don't do it. We bring information, and you out there do it when it comes to impeachment, as you know, and removal of office of the president. That's a political act. Has nothing to do with the courtroom, has nothing to do with rules of evidence. It has to do with Robert C. Byrd, the late senator from West Virginia, who papered that state with our money from all over the country. 2 weeks before Bill Clinton came to a vote in the Senate, the House had impeached him. The Senate would now vote either to convict him or not. And Cokie Roberts, wonderful, wonderful journalist and person who I was then co-anchor with on our Sunday program, asked him a question. He said, well, Senator, how are you going to vote on Article 1, which was perjury? Byrd answered, of course he committed perjury, but people seem to like him and don't want him removed, and so I'm not sure how I'm going to vote. And when the vote came, he voted no. There is a difference between a view of Richard Nixon, who clearly covered up this so-called third-rate burglary, did everything to try to keep the law and the mechanisms from working, and finally, by his own tapes, was brought low. And that's a felony, again. It's a constitutional problem. It occurred because his party, or people in his party, wanted to win an election. And if we don't have honest elections, and I know, folks, I'm not so naive, we have dishonest elections all the time, and people vote from the graveyard, what have you, but we try to keep it at a minimum. If we don't have honest elections, we're going to lose the country the way it is now, have no chance. There's a difference between that and sex. Now, we won't go into this, Holly, in the program.
Let's talk about that.
But people sort of said, yeah, I should have done that with the intern and all of that. But the thought, well, let's open the door to your closet. Could we just look in here? Nah. I think the difference, that's why Bill Clinton, that it wasn't about sex. I agree. I thought it was about perjury. He clearly, that Saturday morning before the judge, when surprised with the information that his opponents knew about this thing with Monica Lewinsky, he clearly didn't answer the question, and he was under oath correctly. But he went on again to leave office finally at the end of his second term. Now here's this you should check, ladies and gentlemen. Don't take my word for it. George Gallup's public approval rating, there are many of them, is still the creme de creme of public approval ratings. The day Bill Clinton left office, he had approval rating of 1 point higher than was Ronald Reagan's the day he left office. Go figure.
Yeah. Well, recently, Fox News broke a story on the invasion of the eastern Ukraine, and really hasn't been dealt with in the other news media outlets until 24, 36 hours later. And finally, CNN breaks the story, and they say, move back those troops, President Obama says. Why do you think it is that certain stories get coverage and others don't now by different news networks?
Lots of reasons. Most big stories get covered fairly quickly by everybody, but a lot of news organizations put their own take on them. Other news organizations, if they have a reporter like me and it was a bad day for me, get it wrong. I mean, all of that, but most of them. A few, yes, someone will break a story that eventually everyone recognizes as a story. But when someone breaks a story and it stays an exclusive for some period of time, we all have to ask, well, why is that? So the rest of us are just all dumb or stupid or have sold out to something? Probably not. Probably there's something wrong with it. Now, in this particular story about the Ukraine, I'm not up to speed on all the facts, so I'm not going to pass a judgment. But certainly, after a period of time, I mean, the best story of modern times to me is Benghazi.
Yeah, I was going to bring that one up.
I have tried, believe it or not, to actually get into the minutia of what everyone is saying, claiming, and what the so-called facts appear to make it out. And it's clear to me at this point that people have chosen up sides, and as they've selected some facts that are facts, which support their view, but neglected to put into the mix, you know, the mix master, the other facts which tend to suggest maybe that's not quite right or what have you. Here we have the CBS case. They went on the air in 60 Minutes, a really prestigious program, with a story of someone who said, hey, he had the facts about how we didn't respond, our people didn't respond there, and it turns out he did bogus, you know, and CBS has had to eat crow on it. That's why, if you look at these stories, it's hard for a long while to know what all the facts really are. People make up their minds. What happened to that airplane?
Yeah.
What happened to that airplane? It's been gone for 3 weeks now. And the conspiracy theories, and this happened, this happened. I think eventually we'll know. It would appear it ran out of fuel, but why was it there on that course? Who put it there and all of this? Eventually we'll know. And by the way, there was no one on the grassy knoll, okay?
Yeah, right. I just saw a program on Nova about that.
Yeah,
So,
nobody there.
yeah. Alexis de Tocqueville said, America is great because she's good. If America ceases to be good, then America will cease to be great. Do you think that we are losing our moral compass
It's
as
changing.
a country?
It's changing.
So you wouldn't say qualitatively
Well,
yes or no?
You know, I hate to sit here and answer every question. What is good? Now, Holly, you and I may know what we think is good. We may agree, or we may disagree on some of the points. But what is good from the standpoint of morals and ethics, way of doing business, way of treating people? Well, I think we can talk about that for a long, long time.
Yeah.
So I agree with Alexis de Tocqueville from the standpoint of if good is something that works for society, for people, because, for instance, I think we got to take care of our fellow citizens. Doesn't mean we have to give them everything. Hey, if they can work, get out there and work. But can't let them die, can we? There was a debate a couple of years ago, and then the moderator asked, I think it was one of the Republican candidates, and why would they come to the emergency room and cost shift and the rest of us have to pay all that and all that? What do? Do we let them die? He said no. I could hear screams in the audience, yeah, let them die. Well, no, don't do that.
Yeah.
So what is good? I think good is making certain people have, if we can, adequate health care. What is adequate? If you need a heart, I've had an aortic valve removed. On paper, it costs $120,000. I'm on Medicare, thanks. I'm on a single-payer system already. Half the country is on a single-payer, British, Canadian-type system. The elderly, military retirees, I can go down the list. And the other half, of course, is arguing whether they should get on or not. Yeah. And I think that's a good argument. I think it's good reasons to discuss it. But the point is, I believe good is doing things like that. Someone else may say, no, let them stand on their own 2 feet, and if they can't stand on their own 2 feet, we have got a responsibility. Is that good? Yeah. They say so. Yeah. So well, that's my problem with the word good.
Yeah, well, it is certainly subjective based on your value system. And originally, the country was founded on a Christian, Judeo-Christian value system. And the question I guess people have is not only what does that mean, but then secondly, are we abandoning that for a different value system?
Well, here's the argument over the First Amendment.
Yeah.
First Amendment has 5 freedoms. One, which says that Congress shall make no law respecting a religion. Using the Thomas Jefferson formula, which isn't in any document except his letter to the Baptists about separation of church and state. Right. I think many of us, I'm one, that means that government should let all religions flourish. Well, maybe not someone who wants to cut off my head because Allah tells them to, but all religions flourish without interfering with a religion. Some people clearly mean they think government should support their view of morality as expressed in their religion. Well, their view of morality may be the best view for society. I'm not going to argue that. But I don't think so. I don't think government has, you know, the old phrase is, what goes on in the bedroom between consenting adults ought to be between the consenting adults. But some people say, no, no, no. No, we're going to tell you, you shouldn't be doing that because that's not moral according to our view. Well, it may not be, and certainly according to your view, but you don't get to run the country without these other views.
Is that kind of your take on the Tea Party? Because you haven't...
Oh, they're good people. Tea Party are fed up. Throughout American history, what they're called mugwumps or what have you, people get fed up with inefficiency, with the way things aren't working, and I think they do some good.
Right.
The problem with the Tea Party today is what you saw last year, up until the end of the year. About 50 to 60 Republicans in the House of Representatives, the House being one of three important parts that make the federal government work. There's the House, there's the Senate, and there's the presidency. Right. About 50 or 60 of the House, a minority, thought they would run the country. You'll do it our way, or we won't pay our debts. What do you mean you won't pay our debts? We've incurred these debts. You got to raise the debt ceiling. It's not like that'll be new money spent. No, we've already spent the money. And people, Boeing says, I want the money. I delivered the airplanes, and they're saying, no, we're not going to pay you. Because unless we get our way, unless you repeal an act we don't like, it could be right, it may be a bad act, that's not my point, we won't play. Well, excuse me, yes, you will play. Or you leave. I mean, you could do that. You go to another country. But you're not going to run the country because you simply think you're right. And that's my problem with...
but isn't that what everybody does, though? I mean, from the standpoint of...
everyone gets in a room.
Everybody negotiates from their point of view.
Negotiate. Yeah. You said a key word. Yes. We all get in a room, and I have a different view, and you have a different view, and the guy over there, and the woman over there says, okay, we got to say something. It's a family, let's say. Where do we send the kid to school? Well, I think this is the best. And mom and dad and maybe the grandparents are there. Eventually, they come to an agreement, and the kid goes, we hope, to a good school. But if they say, I'm not going to play unless it comes to my school that I want, what happens to that family? Right. It cannot survive. Right, yeah. And that's what's happened to the country, although I'm very optimistic. I think we're getting back to the place. Now we have a new budget that lasts. Some people may not like it, and I'm sorry. But at least now we know we're going to pay our bills. We now know businesses can make a projection based on what their taxes might be. Yeah. We get back to business. We're going to confront China at last. I think that's progress. Yeah. But some people who feel very strongly say no. Senator Cruz, if you have him in the program and if you play a tape of what I just said, would shake his head in disgust.
Well, do you think that reporters who have an overtly Christian worldview can be objective?
I hope so.
I mean, because some people would say that if you have a Christian worldview, then you can't be objective. So, I mean, you don't agree with that?
I disagree. If you we talked briefly in our last program just a bit about so many religions in the world.
Right.
And many of them pray to really the same God, but they do it in a different fact, what have you. If you use your view to color your reportage, well, if you want to say, I am looking at this from the Christian viewpoint, fine, great. If you declare, but if you say, I'm an objective reporter trying to find out the facts and present them to you so you can make up your own mind, but you actually are using your view, whether it's Christian, Muslim, what have you, to color your presentation of the facts, that's wrong. That's not reportage. Yeah. That's not the news business as I know it.
Do you think that the news business has changed with the advent of cable media?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
In what way? Positive or negative?
Well, when there's a big story that needs to be covered, positive. They're always there. They're there with people. And their people, whether it's Fox or MSNBC or CNN, are usually pretty well trained, and they're pretty good reporters and all that. But they have to go 24 hours a day. And you can't fill, when there's no big stories, 24 hours a day. So early on, Roger Ailes, brilliant man, brilliant producer, who formed the Fox News Network for Rupert Murdoch, realized that you have opinion sells. It sold in the 30s. Father Coughlin opposed Franklin Roosevelt on the radio, and I mean people listened to him, fortunately from my point of view, not the majority of Americans, but opinion sells. Not just opinion which says, Holly, I think this, what do you think? And you say, well, Sam, I think that. Well, have you considered this? I have opinion which says, Holly, this is right, I'm right, you're wrong, and that person in the White House, I'm going to call him a name. What's that? I think that's destructive. I tell people who watch MSNBC or Fox, watch the other two also. What are they saying? If nothing but to reinforce your view that you've got it right. You've heard the other view. You've considered it. No, but I think they're wrong here. I'm still right. No, I want to go to, I think it's first greater in religion. I was brought up in the Baptist church. I was dipped in the drainage ditch because we had no baptistry at age 11 on the family farm, as a matter of fact. I respect that. You want to go to your church and listen to your pastor, your minister, your priest, your rabbi, that's fine. But when you're talking about secular matters, where we have to all kind of make a deal to get together to move this country forward, you got to listen to the other people too. Yeah. If you refuse to do that, you might miss something. Yeah.
Well, let's free associate for a minute. We'll play a game, okay? What about Al Jazeera News?
It's a good news organization, but it has a point of view. Now, at least the world Al Jazeera, pardon me. People tell me that Al Jazeera America are good merchants in the sense that they understand they have got to present for a wide audience in this country a view that is not one-sided, or they won't have a big audience. And they want a big audience because the big audience means more advertising, means more cash, more dollars. I believe in the capitalistic system. Can I maximize in a way that's legal my ability to draw you and you and you and you into the tent? Al Jazeera America, I think, is pretty good. And I like the fact that at the beginning of the uprising in Cairo.
The spring.
Yeah, the spring. Yeah. Al Jazeera was there, was showing us everything, and I doffed my hat publicly to them for doing that on our This Week program.
I thought that they gave a relatively balanced perspective.
On that story, they certainly did, because here we had the forces of Mubarak versus the people in the street.
Yeah, right.
And even in the French Revolution, eventually, the people in the street always win.
Right. How about low information voter? What about that term?
Well, see, I think it's deplorable, but I would not say, unless you pass an educational test, you as a citizen in this country can't vote. That's going backwards. That's saying to women, hey, let's go back where you couldn't vote, folks, or to the black people. No, you don't want to vote here. After all, who are you anyway? No. I'm not for means testing voting. I am for means testing a lot of government programs, which aren't today means tested.
Yeah. Right.
So that those of us at the trough don't have to get all the taxpayer money.
Do you think that people are less informed now, the average person?
Yes.
And why is that?
I take that back. I anticipated your question wrongly. I think education in this country has educated more people than ever before. Yes, I see the dropout rolls, I see all of that, but still, when I graduated from Texas Western, there were only 15% of the American public had a college degree, any kind of college degree. It is much, much higher today. Yeah. And the kids know so much about so many things that I don't have a clue about. Now, they don't know who Joseph Stalin was, or how many presidents of the United States we've had, or even maybe who the vice president of the United States today is, but they know high tech, and they know this little device called an iPhone, and they know all of that, in addition to other things. Right. So I think education, it depends. Do you have to know that Gibbons wrote The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire? Or do you have to know what works today in the marketplace? And your name is Steve Jobs, and you make a little company called Apple, at one point the richest company in the world. Right. Well, you tell me. What do you have to know?
How about NSA surveillance?
Went too far. It's gone too far. Now, there was a time when the Calvin Coolidge, the Secretary of State, said, "Gentlemen do not read other gentlemen's mail." He was against spying. No, that's not the real world today. We need to know what's going on. But Angela Merkel, who runs Germany, to be eavesdropping on her private conversations, and they got caught, of course.
How about the Chuck Schumer bill where he's saying that they want to license or certify reporters?
No. The news business isn't anything that I would recognize if we have to be someone who passed a test and are certified by government.
That's a dangerous thing.
That is a dangerous thing.
Yeah. Do you think it'll pass?
First Amendment. Yeah. One of the freedoms there of the 5 is freedom of the press and speech. I can't tell you you can't speak unless you pass a test, and you can't tell me I can't report unless I demonstrate my proficiency that government approves of in covering a story. I may be the worst reporter in the world. Some people think that's probably true, but I'll have to fumble along, and if I can't report it well enough over a period of time, ABC would have lost audience, and I would have been fired. The marketplace will correct itself.
Right, yeah. If you could change something about your career and your life and so forth, is there anything that you would change?
Oh, yes. Oh, come on, Holly. The person says, well, I wouldn't change a single thing in my life. It's a fool. Oh, remember the money you lost in Las Vegas? Would you like to have that back if you didn't go? I won't go there. Remember that woman or that man you know? No. I would change a lot of things, but I am content to fall back on Willie Nelson, who once sang a great song about there's nothing you can do about it now. There's nothing to do about it now, so go ahead. Don't waste your time worrying about what you can't change.
Now, you have several grandchildren,
I do.
Right? Yeah. What advice would you give them in this day and age?
Oh, there's so much. I would like them to grow up with a set of moral standards and ethical standards and an understanding that the law that we have is built so the society can function without our tearing ourselves apart in the street. And second, from their standpoint of their own ability to succeed, first thing, have confidence in yourself. If you don't think you can do it, why should I hire you? I mean, if you say, well, I'll give it a try, but I'm not certain I'm qualified, go find some other body to tell that to. In 1974, everyone knew that Jimmy Carter, this retiring Southern governor from Georgia, could not be the nominee of the Democratic Party or the president, except one person. Jimmy Carter didn't know that. Fine. And then I would tell them, find something. People will say to you, find something you love. No. Find something you're good at. You may, I want to be a concert pianist. You may study hard, you may work, but whatever that gift that God gives the great ones, but he gave you something else. Find something you're good at, and you'll love it because you're good at it, and the world will, here's some money, here, come on, lay a straight line of bricks at my house. Yeah. And I could go on, but
what about your faith? Kind of in closing, what would you say about your faith as you were raised? You said as a Baptist.
I was raised in the Baptist church.
How has that evolved?
I'm a backslider.
Okay.
I'm a backslider for reasons which need not detain us because they're individual ones, and I don't mean there's something happened in my life and that scarred me or one way or the other. I think people who believe deeply in religious matters are very fortunate because they, as I understand all religions, ultimately faith is what is required to believe in that religion or believe in that set of, not values necessarily.
Faith is, by virtue of definition, there's not evidence.
Absolutely.
Per se. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. Because Muslims cannot prove that Muhammad did this, that, or the other. The Christian faith, there were people there. They wrote about it, but so much of what we read in the Bible, certainly the New Testament as well, the Old Testament, was written years after the event and often by people who weren't there but picked up stories from others. And as a reporter, I can tell you, even when you're there and looking at something, you get it wrong. And when people tell you stories that happened several decades before, I can tell you, I'm not saying the Christian Bible is wrong, not for a minute. What I'm saying is that people look at what they see. If they can have faith, ultimately, I think they're very fortunate. And I think it helps them in life in so many ways. I can see it in people, and I think it's a good thing.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for all of your thoughts on so many different areas and your patience with us. Really appreciate you being with us.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Great. So what do you think about all of the issues that Sam Donaldson has brought up and about the whole issue of faith and the news media and its coverage? Do you agree that the news media isn't biased when it comes to Christians in the area of faith? I'd like to know what you think. Please contact us on Facebook, Twitter, or kscetv.com. Thank you so much for watching.